Welcome back to Palatable Politics, a show where we take the complexity out of politics and make it palatable for you. With me, your host, Thapelo Maslela. Welcome to the show. Today we're going to be discussing business and its role in society and how it relates to politics. In particular, the pledge by 115 CEOs. Here to discuss and give us insight, especially about the CEO pledge, where 115 CEOs signed on to help government develop capacity. In his capacity as a Deputy CEO of BUSA, Business Unity SA, who's a representative of organized business NEDLAC. Mr. Khulekani Mathe, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Thapelo.
So, I've given the intro with regards to BUSA and the role that it plays in NEDLAC, head of organized business. Can you outline to us what the relationship is between business, politics, and the society?
Well, there are perhaps two ways of viewing that or explaining that. On the one hand, there is a view that we all sort of operate on lanes, that everybody should stay in their lane, business should stay in the business lane, and government in politics, etc., etc. But the reality is that everything is political. How business works is political in the sense that it is affected by political decisions, and so business cannot clearly say that politics don't affect it. So in terms of the relationship with government, you will have heard, and I heard you in your intro referring to the pledge by CEOs to work with government. It is indeed true. The number has increased to more than 130 CEOs of very large companies whose total market capitalization is upwards of 11 trillion rand. So these are large companies that essentially drive the South African economy. The CEOs have said, we want to work with government to address three critical challenges that are facing the country, one being energy. And there's no need to explain that, right? Because this interview might not finish before we have a load shedding hitting us. The second one is transport and logistics, and I'll say a thing or two about that. And the third one is crime and corruption. All of these affect us every day as society. They affect business even more, right? As an example, the Reserve Bank estimates that just the transport and logistics crisis alone is likely to deduct 2% from GDP growth for 2023. So this is a huge challenge. There have been media reports that if nothing changes, some of the mining companies may have to shed some 35,000 jobs, right? Because obviously you're not getting products out to markets, especially exports, and so that does affect the economy. So these are really, really big challenges that if they're not addressed, we are actually going backwards and not forwards as an economy.
We'll come back to the employment aspect because that's a big one. But corruption, we know the corruption challenges we have. And I'm happy that you guys have come together and created that work stream to deal with corruption. However, there's a big focus on corruption in the public sector. What about the corporate sector? And there was a recent research that came out and said that 90% of students are willing to leave SA because of crime and corruption. So how are you guys going to tackle that, one, but also the role of private sector in corruption?
So let me address the last part of the question. Thapelo, I have to be absolutely honest. I don't think it's helpful to say this one is corrupt or that one is corrupt. That's not helpful.
Okay.
What is helpful for us as a country is to say corruption is bad for this economy, for this country. Whether the corruption is done or the corrupt people are in the private sector, in civil society, or in government, we must have the resolve to deal with it and deal with it ruthlessly, put people in jail in orange overalls, irrespective of their standing in society. That's what we should be doing. It's true that corrupt people are everywhere, every sector of society. But the main thing is, let's find them and let's deal with them ruthlessly.
So the work stream in particular, what are they going to be doing? Can you give us a bit of a dissecting into what are they actually doing?
Yeah. So that focal area, as we now call these three sort of initiatives, is called Joint Initiative to Fight Crime and Corruption. And it's important that we have not just isolate corruption on its own, because it's part of larger crimes in society, and those crimes make it difficult just to enjoy life in this country. So, I'm sure you didn't know this, but I do like a little bit of long distance running. So I like to, at the end of a day, get back home, put on my running shoes and run in the streets. As a man, I can probably take a chance and do that. But my wife, who also loves distance running, she has to think twice. She has to organize her friends so that they can run in a group, because of the extent of corruption in this country. So we just can't live normal lives because of crime. We just can't live normal lives because of this crime. But of course, you've got crime that takes place in various spaces. There's the so-called construction mafia. There is the illegal mining that's happening. There's the more sophisticated illicit financial flows. And then, of course, you've got the new phenomenon of izinkabi, the killing of people for whatever reason. I mean, this is the story of South Africa. So on the one hand, we need to have the agencies of the state that are fighting crime and corruption to really be effective and deal with these things. And we're supporting them in various ways to be effective. On the corruption side of things, which is usually sort of the prosecution side of things, where we're currently lacking, because we've had commissions like the Zondo Commission, but others that have pointed to areas where there was corruption that needs to be investigated further and those people prosecuted. We haven't seen enough of that, and so there's a need for the agencies that are responsible for prosecution to have the necessary capacity to be able to prosecute corruption cases in South Africa more effectively.
The second issue, employment.
Yeah.
We've got an unemployment crisis in the country, especially youth unemployment. There's always government saying, and government themselves have said it, but also society saying, government's supposed to create 2 million jobs, 5 million jobs, but whose responsibility is it to create jobs?
So jobs are created by businesses. There are a few people, and they always have to be few, comparatively, who are employed in different parts of government and government agencies, etc. We accept that. But the jobs that are going to ensure that everybody is gainfully employed have to be created by businesses. There's no doubt about that. However, the story doesn't end there, because businesses have to have the right conditions in order to create jobs. I've just made an example at the beginning where even the existing jobs, right, are threatened by certain failures that we are experiencing, in this case in the transport and logistics sector, right? So that's threatening jobs already. In other words, one of the critical conditions for the mining sector employing people does no longer hold, and therefore jobs are affected. And so there is a role for government in the job creation equation, although primarily it has to be with the private sector. But as I've said, I mean, again, small businesses are the most affected by crime, right? If you run a spaza shop, you know that you're going to be hit almost every week. People wanting cash. And so you depending on how well you're doing, you might stick it out, but it's gonna get to a point where you're like, I can't take this anymore. Similarly, Whereas large companies can make alternative arrangements to address the energy crisis, they can buy big generators, etc., etc. Small businesses are particularly affected. They don't have the capacity to do that. And so when you have these repeated load shedding episodes, which mean that you have to pay people who are sitting and doing nothing, you get to a point where it doesn't make business sense, to continue operating when you can only run operations for 3-4 hours in a day, when you have staff that are sitting idling for the remainder of the time. So again, job creation, yes, the private sector, but there are critical conditions that need to be met, and government is responsible largely for those. But we've come together to say it's no longer just about you do this and we do that. Let's come together and try and fix this problem, because it affects us all in the end.
So one of the things that's led to the pledge and all the companies coming together is creating capacity to deal with some of the things in terms of creating a conducive environment. Now, if you're practically speaking, from an operational point of view, how is the pledge and all the companies coming together going to work towards creating jobs?
So in the first instance, I think you're right in saying that it's about creating capacity. Now, what's happened, and I know that some people don't like this, but we have been through a period of state capture in South Africa, which caused a lot of harm, especially to public institutions. They got hollowed out, so the capacity to run a department efficiently gone, right? And that needs to be rebuilt. And so as a consequence of that, you're starting to see all of these challenges that we're facing. So the 3 initiatives that we're working on with government, they actually, all of them are run by things called crisis committees. So you've got a National Energy Crisis Committee, you've got a National Logistics Crisis Committee, and DETO for crime and corruption. So there's recognition that things have reached crisis proportions. Naturally, the response to a crisis is not the same as business as usual. So we're making emergency responses to a crisis to stop the bleeding that's happening. As I've said, the jobs that are likely to be lost in various sectors. So there's a sort of crisis response that's required in the immediate term. But of course, once we've stopped the bleeding, we then need to say, what are the more sustainable ways of ensuring that we grow sustainably going forward? And that's going to take time, and that's going to take resources. We're hoping that the government capacity will also increase in the period as we work on these, but that we build the capacity for the state to be able to then run those systems efficiently. Just to make an example of what this looks like. I mean, 2 of our major SOEs that are responsible for, on the one hand, energy, and on the other, freight, rail, logistics, do not have CEOs, right? And so it tells you that the capacity to lead these entities in delivering on their mandate is not there at the moment. They're run by acting CEOs, etc., etc. So part of this is just about building those systems and making sure that these entities are appropriately capacitated with the leadership and everybody with the skills that are required to run things going forward.
Without giving away your age, no? You were in government a while ago. Yeah, like I say, without giving away your age. What then got you to opt to get into government? And what now do you think would be able to attract the youth to strive to work for government and increase the capacity you're referring to in a more sustainable manner?
I think that it's important to really create a public service that is insulated from this sort of political interference. People need to be able to say that, I have a passion for working for government, and I can go and work for government, contribute to the running of the country without all of this political, you know. I'll give you an example. This is something I say not very often. I used to work in the presidency many years ago. And when I joined the presidency, the interview that, of the panel that interviewed me, not once was I ever asked if I'm a member of the governing party, the ANC, or not. And throughout much of the time, that never arose as a question to me directly. Am I a member of the ANC? Right? Of course, later on, then, as I've described earlier, things started getting a bit wobbly. But the point I'm making here is that people should be able to work for the government on the basis of their skills, and that they're going to be treated on the basis of their skills, not because of political connections and so on. Unfortunately, the narrative out there is that to be able to get a job in government, you've got to know people and so on. So we've got to get rid of that. We've got to go back to that public service where people can really go in because they have the skill, and the skill is what we want to run a particular section of the public service or to work in a particular sector of the public service. And that I was lucky to have, and that's why I could go into government, really give it my best without having to worry about anything else.
Still focusing on the governance aspect in terms of creating capacity and unemployment. In creating jobs, right, I believe that there's a bit of a mismatch between the skills in which are being developed, whether it be your universities, technicons, and the job skills required in the market. Is there anything that, one, the pledge is dealing with, or two, as BUSA, to try and align that?
So in the first instance, you know, the pledge by the CEOs and the enormous effort that we're all putting into behind that pledge is in response to this crisis that I have described, which we are all aware of. But there are many other challenges in society that we have, and we have been at pains to say, yes, there are problems in health. Yes, there are problems in education. Yes, there are problems in the water system. Yes, there are problems in local government. I mean, just 77 people died a recent while in Johannesburg. That talks to the extent of the problems in local government. So yes, there are all of these problems, but we've said let's focus on a few, get some successes there, and then we can move on to try and address others. So the skills issue is absolutely critical. For business, it is a huge problem. It is not yet one of the three areas, but certainly one that does need to be addressed. Of course, we have other processes in society that are trying to address this. I mean, you know, we all come together in a body called NEDLEC, which is a social dialogue platform where different sectors meet and really talk about policy. So there are efforts at the level of NEDLEC to try and address the skills issue. You also have a body called the Human Resources Development Council that is also meant to say what are the skills that we need in this economy and how do we go about producing them. So those processes are there. Are they effective? Look, all I can say is that what we have clearly doesn't match the expectation of business. So more needs to be done there in addressing the skills challenge that we are facing.
Okay, so skills, jobs, we've addressed that. If I'm not mistaken, 95% of businesses globally are small businesses, which create about 60 to 70% of jobs. Now, one of the things for small businesses, the challenges they have is financing. It's primarily the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
And the CEO pledge is, well, I think it was 132 of big companies.
Yes.
How do we now use that to translate into support, even if it's not that, or in the capacity as BUSA, to translate into support and access to finance for small and informal businesses to be able to create these jobs?
So I think it is true that in many economies around the world, up to about 90% of jobs are actually created by small businesses.
90.
And they are the largest contributors to GDP. In South Africa, that's not happening yet. And there are a number of reasons for this. Some of them are the crises that I've spoken about, you know, but there are many other underlying challenges that we face. So it is about the ecosystem to support businesses because small businesses need, for instance, a space to operate. Do they have do we have that infrastructure readily available for small businesses to operate? Small businesses obviously need access to resources that allow them to run their businesses in terms of accounting and financial management and all of that stuff. That ecosystem is being built, but it's not there yet. And then, of course, there's finance, there's access to markets. Many businesses are failing because it's a really good idea, proven product, but difficult in accessing markets. So there's a lot that we need to address in order to get a thriving small business sector in South Africa. We'll be shooting ourselves in the foot if we do not do that. I don't want us to kind of put small business versus big business because actually these are all businesses. Small businesses are suppliers to some of the small businesses or should be, and so on. And small businesses are also consumers of some of the products of big business. So there needs to be a relationship that makes sure that small businesses can thrive and that they get supported. Finance is one of the challenges, and I think will remain one of the challenges. So we've got a fairly sophisticated banking system that, by the way, currently provides upwards of 70% of any funding to small businesses is still provided by banks. The DFIs are providing a minuscule of that, of the funding to small businesses. Unfortunately, we are relying too much on banks when, in some instances, banks will give you debt, which you are going to be required to pay next month, right? When you are still trying to set up and so on. So that's not the best form of finance for small businesses. It might be useful at a certain point in the life of a business. What we're lacking are types of businesses, types of finance like venture capital, so equity, people who are going to take a chance and put in money, support the business over a long period of time in a form of equity, and then they pull out at a certain point. So we don't have a well-developed venture capital a system in South Africa. It's still nascent. So the point I'm making is that when we talk about this ecosystem, we've got to build all of these things so that they can support small businesses. I mean, there are efforts underway, and there's some really interesting innovations that you see trying to address this. We just don't have the scale yet that we require.
Yeah. So for our viewers, whether it's a Vanessa, Tab, or Steve, that one have a business that they would like to get involved, an NGO, or even in their personal capacity, how can they come and get involved? Whether it's the pledge, BUSA, yeah.
So just start by explaining how BUSA membership works. So BUSA is an apex body. In other words, it's the body, the sort of highest body that organizes organized business. Our members are industry associations, so they're not direct businesses, right? So for instance, the Banking Association is a member of BUSA. The Minerals Council is a member of BUSA. The Chemicals Association is a member of BUSA. So we don't have direct businesses as our members. But of course we've got in our membership organizations that represent chambers of commerce, right, who deal more directly with small businesses on the ground. But I think the point that needs to be made is that this effort we're talking about of the 130 CEOs is really just saying that we all need to put a shoulder to the wheel, and we need to find an appropriate way. So we need to find a way in which, as a small business, you're able to put your shoulder to the wheel in your locality. To the extent that we can assist and we work with the chambers, etc., etc., there is a way for everybody to play a part, because we can't step back. Stepping back or standing back will simply make these challenges that we're trying to address last for longer, and that will have a detrimental effect on the economy and livelihoods of people.
Okay, all right. So guys, for your guys' benefit, one, with regards to the pledge, we'll put it out there for you, a link to BUSA for you to find out more about them and the other members that are associated with the BUSA. But from your side, thank you very much for giving us insight, educating us. When there are developments, we'll give you a ring. I hope you're going to come back, which, I mean, you've been easy. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Guys, tune in, same time, same place next week. Don't forget to subscribe, like, follow, share. Yeah, I think I got it this time. Thank you.